Buckle up, people. This is going to be a long one. So I'll play this demo here first, and then we'll break down how you go about arranging something like this. So in context with a guitar to start with.
Singing a made-up melody, counting the problems you'll run into.
Acappella.
Singing a made-up melody, counting the problems you'll run into.
Acappella with bass.
Singing a made-up melody, counting the problems you'll run into.
All right, so from the beginning, the simplest form of harmony would be unisoning, also known as doubling or layering in the audio world. And this is where the same singer or a different singer sings the same part as the melody, which thickens it up quite a bit. So let's hear first the melody by itself.
Singing a made-up melody, counting the problems you'll run into.
Layers with it.
Singing a made-up melody, counting the problems you'll run into.
So doubling with the same vocalist is the standard on like every CD ever, but if you're after a bigger group vocal sound, a la Backstreet Boys, One Direction, Queen, etc., the secret to the power of those vocals is actually having multiple people singing the melody or harmonies together.
All right.
Say it right.
All right. All right.
Correctly. That's better. So to round off the really simple stuff, let's quickly go over octaving, which is where you'll sing the same notes as the melody, just in a different octave, hence the name. So first, octave above the melody, sounds like this.
Singing a made-up melody, counting the problems you'll run into.
Octave below.
Singing a made-up melody, counting the problems you'll run into.
Both together.
Singing a made-up melody, counting the problems you'll run into.
So pretty simple, and that triple octave sound is especially popular in hip hop and pop vocals. But now let's get into singing different notes than the melody with two-part harmony. So first you should write out the melody in MIDI, sheet music, or a tuning plugin graph. This will allow you to visually see the arrangement as you work on it. Me personally, I do MIDI first because it allows me to see all of the voices when doing multiple part harmony. And then I'll port all the individual parts into Auto-Tune's grid mode, which if you don't know about this is just like the biggest time saver on earth. It allows you to hear the voices without having to actually sing them. So you would take your melody, do the track pitch button, it'll port the melody into here, and then you'll be able to manipulate it into the different harmony parts. Turn the format control on, which will keep it sounding as much like a human voice as possible. Put the note objects to 0, and then use this note tool here to just draw on all the different parts, and then you've saved yourself a ton of time by not having to demo stuff out. Now you need to decide if you're going to harmonize above or below the melody. In either case, the easiest way to do this if you don't have a theory background is just harmonize in all thirds in relation to the melody, and then change notes that don't sound good to your ear. So we're in C minor, and this melody starts on G. And let's do a harmony above. So to find our third, we'll simply skip a letter in the scale. So C, A flat, not interested. B flat, you my girl. And I'm gonna leave the piano roll up while we listen to all the vocal takes, but I'll replace the audio with actual vocals so you don't have to listen to MIDI piano for the next however long this video ends up being. So here we go, thirds above, no changes.
Singing a made-up melody, counting the problems you'll run into.
So that all sounds pretty good. The only two notes I'm going to change, which are almost just personal preferences, because this does kind of just work how it is this A flat up to B flat, and this D up to E flat, and then let's play everything back again.
Singing a made-up melody, counting the problems you'll run into.
And that's more what I'd be looking for if this was two-part with only a top voice. And let's check out the bottom voice and see if there's any other problems we run into. Again, all thirds, but just below this time.
Singing a made-up melody, counting the problems you'll run into.
Okay, so a little bit more of obvious problems, which is usually the case with the bottom voice. Let's move this guy down. So yeah, with above, if something's wrong, you're gonna move the note up. With below, if something's wrong, you move it down. That guy goes down, this guy goes down. Russ could probably stay. Let's listen to it again.
Singing a made-up melody, counting the problems you'll run into.
So that's the bread and butter standard way to do two-part harmony, but I know a lot of you are probably thinking, but I don't want to be standard. I want to be different. But here's the deal. On a simply pleasing to listen to level, these are the most consonant or prettiest sounding intervals that you can pick, which is why 90% of two-part harmony is written exactly like this. If you do want to break off a bit, I would highly suggest that you harmonize below the melody. Since it's lower in pitch, it doesn't become distracting when it doesn't follow exactly. And a good thing you can do is turn the voice into more of a drone where you're singing one note for either the entirety of the melody, depending on what it is, or for just a larger section. So in this case, something like this.
Singing a made-up melody, counting the problems you'll run into.
Or you could do the top harmony an octave down, and then you'd be a sixth below the melody instead of a third, and that would sound like this.
Singing a made-up melody, counting the problems you'll run into.
And from here, you could change some notes around if you still wanted something different. So maybe we do something like, we start a sixth below, and then we jump back to our third below position for there, and maybe also here. I know, this is so gorgeous sounding. All right, would sound like this.
Singing a made-up melody, counting the problems you'll run into.
And maybe that's not even enough for us because we're such a unique snowflake with our background vocals. Let's do a octave of the melody to start, into six below, and then back to our normal third position. Cross voices. Now we're doing the top voice in the regular octave. Let's do octave of the melody again. Back to the sixth, jump back up to be the top voice again. And let's get rid of these. And all together sounds like this. No.
Singing a made-up melody, counting the problems you'll run into.
So you can kind of see with two-part harmony, once you learn to write the top and the bottom voice, you can almost do anything you want within reason, as long as it's not too distracting. With three-part harmony, that luxury is over, my friend, because the whole goal of three-part harmony is to make triads or chords. And if your harmony's jumping all over the place, doing all this stupid shit, then that's gonna make that impossible for the third voice to finish the chord. So to teach you guys the rules of this part writing stuff and to remind you of everything we've learned so far, I've made this story that I promise you will not forget. So get cozy as I read you.
The creation of harmony. There once lived a queen, and her name was Melody. She was created by the magic of Chord Castle, and while Melody was a free spirit doing mostly what she pleased, she always respected the castle. One day Melody grew lonely and she said,
Castle, I would like a friend.
And so Chord Castle created her dearest friend, Harmony. Melody gazed upon her and said,
Harmony, you will be my dearest friend. You will follow me everywhere. And you may also do what you wish, but if you ever try to overshadow me or disrespect the rules of this castle, I will have your fucking head. Am I clear?
Yes, my queen.
And so they sang together, duet after duet, until one day Melody grew tired and she said,
Castle, I would like another friend.
And so Chord Castle created her, well, less dear friend.
Why is she so ugly?
Oh my. As the pair gazed upon her, Melody said,
Child, your name is Harmony too. You create chords when I say, you octave your sister when I say, or you double me when I wish to sound extra impressive. And you, Harmony One. Your days of frolicking about are over. You will sing only notes that allow for your sister to create chords when I command it. We are a family now, so sing.
Now we sing a song for you, so you can run.
And so the trio sang on for the rest of eternity. There are rumors of a fourth or fifth member joining, but for now, we leave that fantasy only to imagination.
And now is a perfect time for a word from our sponsor. This video is sponsored by Squarespace. No, it's not.
Fuck Squarespace, this video is sponsored by me.
So if you're watching this video to get the secret Cyber Monday discount code, here it is. Use Chord Castle at checkout to get 15% off, and we'll run this until Wednesday at midnight. So keeping everything we've learned so far in mind, doing 3-part is really not that much more difficult than doing 2-part. You just again decide, is my main voice above or below? And if you decided above, then your third voice is gonna be below the melody. If you decided below, your third voice is gonna be above the melody. So let's just take that above and below harmony that we wrote in earlier during the 2-part section, put them both into here, and see how they sound as a 3-part arrangement as is.
Singing a made-up melody, counting the problems you'll run into.
Honestly, pretty good. There's nothing that's incorrect about this arrangement, but I'm gonna show you guys a couple things you can do to make it better. So I wrote this melody to be intentionally problematic for the common issues you'll see as an arranger, hence the lyrics of singing a made-up melody, counting the problems you'll run into. And the first problem that you'll see a lot, which I don't know if you really want to call it a problem, but it can be difficult to decide how to harmonize quick riffs like this because they descend so fast through the chord changes that there's almost infinite possibilities for how to do them. So if we play what we have here right now.
Singing a made-up.
First of all, I'm not crazy about that diminished chord right there, so I would change one of these notes to be something different. So let's try changing this one down.
Singing a made-up.
Or we can change this one.
Singing a made-up.
Both work, but we've kind of lost that effect of everything kind of descending at the same time. So how I would harmonize that and how I did harmonize that on the final thing is doing it like this.
Singing a made-up.
So for my taste, this is the way I wanted it, but again, there are so many more options. Say you wanted to just turn the bottom voice into a drone here.
Singing a made-up melody.
That totally works. What if you wanted both voices to be a drone and then only come into the chord right on that offbeat?
Singing a made-up melody.
Again, works. What if you wanted this voice to just not do anything until it comes in on the offbeat?
Singing a made-up.
You can see how you can end up spending like half an hour on a half a second of the arrangement. So that's just something to look out for. And once you do this enough, you'll kind of develop your tastes as an arranger, and you'll know what you kind of like to hear and stuff like this. And that will usually be your first option, and then you can change from there, and it's a little bit easier to do. But when you're starting off, there's just like, how do I do this? There's so many options, so just keep that in mind. And the next problem you're gonna run into is when melodies make giant leaps up or down, and I made this melody do both. So it goes from D to E flat, down to A flat, up to G very quickly. And this isn't that difficult to sing in context of a melody because it's kind of sing-songy, you kind of know where it's supposed to go. But when you're doing a harmony that follows that, a lot of times it can sound like nonsense with those big jumps out of context, which makes it difficult for the person to sing it. And on an album, that's not that big of a deal, but if you've ever sang in a live vocal group, you know that one person missing their marks makes the train come off the tracks real quick.
Oh no.
So in a situation like this, I highly prefer to do what's called voice crossing, which is exactly what it sounds like. You're just transposing one of the voices up or down an octave to meet your needs. So in this case, we started with the harmony above and below, and then on this one note, we're switching, so we'll have two voices above the melody and none below. And that's gonna make the parts much easier to sing. So the top voice only has to go instead of, and the bottom voice, got it made. Melody. No one's gonna mess that one up. So let's listen to it with and without the voice swap.
Singing a made-up melody. Singing a made-up melody.
Much better. And I would do the same thing for this section of the arrangement. Bottom voice is already at B flat, so why don't I just let it stay at B flat for most of the rest of the next section. Move this one up the octave. Let top voice take this, and then we've got
counting the problems you'll run into
instead of
counting the problems you'll run into.
So you may have noticed that the whole arrangement got a lot cleaner when we bumped that bottom voice up the octave, and that's actually the second reason that I'll do voice crossing is you really don't want to harmonize vocal triads too low below this middle C octave here, which is C3 in your DAW. Don't know why. It's supposed to be C4 because that's what middle C actually is, but that's what it is. But if you start harmonizing too low below this octave, it can start to sound a little muddy. Unfortunately, there's not like a definitive note I can say, don't ever go below that one with your bottom voice, because it's just not how it works. It depends on the song. It depends, is the root being sang in the bottom of the chord? Is the third being sang? Lots of stuff. But I would say probably as a guide, if you start getting your bottom voice below this G, below middle C, at least start to be aware of it and ask yourself, okay, is this getting a little too muddy? Should I maybe move something up an octave? And you should be okay with following that. And if your melody is really high or low, you may just want to go with two voices above or below respectively, and that style of arranging is especially popular in things like country music.
If you don't like America, you can get out.
Next, I want to go over all the chord shapes you'll be singing so you can start to visualize them as you do an arrangement. The first thing you need to know is that every triad has 3 positions. There's first what's called the root position, which this chord is C major, so we have the notes C, E, and G. If C, the name of the chord, is at the bottom, that's what's called root position. If the third, in this case E, is at the bottom, that's what's called first inversion. And if the fifth, in this case G, is at the bottom, that's what's called second inversion. So they're all C major, you're just switching the order of what notes come at the bottom. So you'd run into all these shapes, like if the melody was singing E, you want to be above and below, you'd have G above, C below. Melody sings G, C above, E below. Melody sings C, E above, G below, etc. And they sound like this. So now let's move on to the minor chord shapes. So now we got C minor here in root position, first inversion, and second inversion. Then we'll have our sus chords starting first with the sus2, which is where the third gets replaced by a second. Sounds like this. Then a sus4 chord where the third gets replaced by a fourth. Sounds like this. And then diminished chords, which is where the fifth of a minor chord gets flattened by a half step. Sounds like this. And then last and certainly least, an augmented chord, which is where the fifth gets raised a half step from a major chord. Sounds like this. So 95% of the time when you're doing a 3-part arrangement, these are the shapes that you're trying to make. Now what about the other 5% of the time? Well, if you remember back to our story, you don't always have to do a 3-part chord for every single note of the melody. It's pretty common for the third voice to break off and double the melody, octave the top voice, octave the melody, not sing at all, break off and go ooh in the background. It's really up to your discretion as an arranger, but there are a few spots where you'll be singing 3 different notes and not technically making a full chord. You'll see this a lot if you're doing a drone as the bottom voice and the other 2 are just kind of off doing their own thing. So if we look at this melody here with the top voice together, they sound like this. And if we wrote in a third bottom voice, just droning the root of this chord, it would sound like this. So it sounds good, but these little kind of more crunched together areas compared to the triads are not full chords. And these kind of work best as just quick little kind of like tension and release devices. So if we play this here, it starts a little tense, drops a 2-part, and then this one, a little tense, goes to a nice triad. So just nice little kind of tension release ornaments to throw in the arrangement, spice things up a bit. So now we're on to 4-part arranging, of which there are 2 kinds. There's contemporary 4-part that you would hear in context of instruments. And then there's a cappella 4-part where there's a true bass line happening. So let's start with the contemporary version first, because that one is much easier. So we've got a 3-part arrangement here, sounds like this.
Singing a made-up melody, counting the problems you'll run into.
And to make it a 4-part arrangement is dead easy. You just pick one of the voices to octave. In this case, I chose the top voice an octave down. Sounds like this.
Singing a made-up melody, counting the problems you'll run into.
And you could pick any of the voices you want to octave. You could do the bottom voice an octave up, melody an octave up, melody octave down. Totally up to your discretion. As an arranger, you hear them all the time. What you don't generally hear is the 4th voice being actually different notes than the 3-part arrangement. It's just kind of too much information for our brains to take in with 4 different notes happening throughout the whole melody. The only time I ever hear it break off from a true octave is like if the melody ends like, yeah, or whatever at the end of it with a big sustained note, you might hear the 4th voice break off and make a more lush chord at the end of it. But other than that, it's just straight up an octave. Now an a cappella 4-part with a true bass line is a little bit more intricate to arrange. You generally wouldn't hear this style of arranging with instruments because the bass voice just gets too messy with instruments, especially bass ones happening. But as its own thing, bass voice is obviously very important. So to get started writing a bass voice, I would think of it just like playing a bass guitar, where the main objective is playing the root notes of the chords that are happening. So if we play our 3-part arrangement here in the piano roll.
Singing a made-up melody, counting the problems you'll run into.
We have the chords that need to happen here at the bottom, so we can just write those in to follow along with the melody, and that would sound like this sung.
Singing a made-up melody, counting the problems you'll run into.
So you could totally use this as is, and it would sound great, but I personally like to spice up the bass voice a little more. So the first thing I'll do is look for riffs that I can kind of follow along with. So I'm gonna have that octave the melody over here. And then I'll have this not do that chord there. And this is what I did for the final.
Singing a made-up melody, counting the problems you'll run into.
So just a little more interesting. Now it's totally up to you as the arranger which octave you want the bass voice to be sung in. You know, made a melody or made a melody. Can't sing A flat right now. I've been talking too long. So yeah, if we hear down here, we've got the bass voice in this octave.
Singing a made-up melody.
And then we've got it in this one too.
Singing a made-up melody.
And I usually prefer to do it in both because why not? But it depends how low your bass singer can sing and what you're looking for. But I generally find that both sounds really good. And if you want to make this a 5-part arrangement, which I usually do for a cappella stuff, just add in the contemporary 4-part version with an octave of one of the other voices, and altogether everything sounds like this.
Singing a made-up melody, counting the problems you'll run into.
Damn, that was a marathon of a video, but I think we're finally done. If you want to know more about producing vocals, that's what I'll be posting all of December. And if you don't, there's always next year. Hit me up in the comments. You got questions, I got answers. Peace.